I stood frozen at the grand piano during my sister's lavish wedding, facing hundreds of guests. My mother had forced me to play background music despite knowing my crippling performance anxiety. She'd deliberately set me up to fail to appear less talented than my perfect sister Amanda. As my fingers hovered over the keys, tears threatening to spill, I made a split-second decision. Instead of playing the classical piece my mother demanded, I began a hauntingly beautiful composition of my own, one that told the painful truth of my family's betrayal. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was teaching 8-year-old Lily her scales. My phone buzzed insistently, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I ignored it, focusing instead on guiding Lily's small fingers across the keys. "That's perfect, Lily. Remember to keep your wrists loose," I said, demonstrating the fluid motion. The phone finally stopped but immediately started again. I sighed. "Why don't you practice that section again? I need to take this call." Stepping into the hallway of my small music studio, I answered, "Hi, Mom. I'm in the middle of a lesson." "Rosa," my mother said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of authority that still made my stomach knot. "Amanda's wedding pianist just canceled. The wedding is in 3 weeks. You need to fill in." Not a question, a statement. At 28 years old, I still hadn't mastered standing up to Catherine Miller, the woman who had simultaneously nurtured my musical talent and crushed my confidence. "Mom, you know I don't perform anymore." "I haven't in years." "Don't be ridiculous. It's your sister's wedding. You can manage to play a few simple pieces during the ceremony and cocktail hour." She spoke as if I'd declined out of laziness rather than the paralyzing anxiety that had ended my performance career before it began. "I can help find another pianist," I offered. "I know several who—" "No. Amanda specifically asked for you." Her voice softened slightly, hitting that manipulative note I knew too well. "She wants her sister to be part of her special day. You wouldn't disappoint her, would you?" I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall. Amanda and I had grown apart over the years, largely due to our mother's constant comparisons. Amanda was the golden child, beautiful, sociable, successful in her marketing career, and now marrying a wealthy businessman. I was the family disappointment, the failed pianist, who now taught children in a converted spare bedroom of my apartment. "What would I need to play?" I asked already, feeling myself giving in. "Just some classical pieces during the seating and the cocktail hour. Nothing complicated. I'll email you the selections." I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Catherine Miller always got her way. "Fine," I agreed reluctantly. "I'll do it for Amanda." "Wonderful. I'll tell her you've agreed. Come by the house tomorrow afternoon to pick up the sheet music." The next day, I drove to my parents' sprawling suburban home, the place where I'd spent countless childhood hours practicing until my fingers cramped. My father's BMW and my mother's Lexus sat in the circular driveway symbols of the success my parents had always valued above all else. I knocked lightly before using my key. No one answered, but I could hear voices coming from the sunroom at the back of the house. Intending to announce my presence, I walked quietly down the hallway, but paused when I heard my name. "Rosa will be fine playing at the ceremony," my mother was saying. "No one will be paying attention anyway. She's just background music." "Are you sure?" Amanda's voice. "You know how she gets with performances." "That's exactly why this is perfect," my mother replied, her voice dropping slightly. "No one will notice if she messes up. She'll be in the background where she belongs, and you'll be the star of the show." I froze my hand on the wall to steady myself. "Mom, that's kind of mean," Amanda said, but with a laugh that undercut any real objection. "It's practical. Your sister needs to get over this ridiculous anxiety. Besides, she teaches piano, for goodness sake. She should be able to play a few simple pieces without falling apart. If she can't even handle being background music at her sister's wedding, then she really is hopeless." I stood there, the familiar pain of my mother's dismissal washing over me. This wasn't about helping Amanda or a canceled pianist. This was about putting me in my place, setting me up to fail in public to prove what my mother had always believed, that I was a disappointment unworthy of the talent I'd been born with. I almost turned around, almost walked out, and texted some excuse. But then, What my mother would have confirmation of everything she believed about me. I'd be proving her right. I took a deep breath plastered on a neutral expression and walked into the sunroom as if I'd just arrived. "Hi, Mom Amanda. I'm here for the music." My mother's smile was so seamless you'd never know what she'd just said. "Rosa, perfect timing. We were just talking about the wedding." "I bet you were," I thought, but just nodded and accepted the folder she handed me. "These are simple enough that you should be able to handle them," she said, patting my hand condescendingly. "Just practice, so you don't embarrass yourself, or your sister." Amanda gave me an awkward smile. She looked uncomfortable, but said nothing to contradict our mother. She never did. "I'll do my best," I said the words, tasting bitter in my mouth. I left shortly after the folder, clutched in my hands, my mother's words echoing in my head. Background music. Where she belongs. If she messes up, no one will notice. Little did my mother know she'd just sparked something in me. Something beyond hurt. Something like determination. My relationship with music began before I could remember. According to family legend, I was picking out melodies on my toy piano at age 3. By 5, I was taking formal lessons and progressing at a rate that astonished my first teacher, Mrs. Harmon, a gentle woman with silver hair who smelled like peppermints. "Rosa has a rare gift," Mrs. Harmon told my parents after 6 months of lessons. "She plays with emotion beyond her years. It's not just technical skill, many children can be taught that. It's her innate understanding of the music. She feels it." My mother took this news like a prospector discovering gold. Catherine Miller had been a talented violinist in her youth, but had given up her musical aspirations when she married my father. Now, she saw in me the chance to fulfill her abandoned dreams. The gentle encouragement of Mrs. Harmon gave way to my mother's rigorous expectations. 2 hours of practice became 4, then 6 on weekends. My childhood became measured in scales, arpeggios, and increasingly complex pieces. Again, my mother would say, standing over me at the piano, "Your tempo was off in the 3rd measure." "But Mom, I've been practicing for 3 hours. And you'll practice 3 more, if that's what it takes to get it right. Excellence doesn't happen by accident, Rosa." I loved the piano. The feel of the keys under my fingers. The way music could express what words couldn't. But under my mother's relentless pressure that love became contaminated with anxiety, the joy increasingly crowded out by fear of failure. When I was 12, Amanda was born. My parents had waited 9 years to have a second child, and my mother's attention was briefly diverted. Those months were like summer after a long winter. I would sneak to the piano while my mother was busy with the baby and play for myself, rediscovering the pleasure in music. But as Amanda grew, she became my mother's new project, not for music, but for the social graces Catherine valued so highly. And a new dynamic emerged the comparison. Where I was serious and introverted, Amanda was bubbly and charming. Where I struggled socially, preferring books and music to people, Amanda collected friends effortlessly. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became a constant refrain in our house. Amanda knows how to present herself. Amanda understands the importance of making a good impression. The only area where I outshone Amanda was music, and I clung to that distinction even as the pressure around it intensified. As I entered high school, my mother began entering me in prestigious competitions, envisioning Juilliard and concert halls in my future. And then came the recital that changed everything. I was 16, preparing for a competition that could lead to a summer program at a conservatory. The piece was Chopin's Ballade Num, 1-inch G minor, technically challenging and emotionally demanding. I'd been practicing it for months, often until my fingers were stiff and my back ached. The day of the recital, I felt ill with nerves. My mother dismissed my anxiety. "Everyone gets nervous. Push through it. This performance could determine your entire future." The hall was larger than I'd expected, filled with serious-faced judges and parents. As I walked to the grand piano on the stage, the silence was oppressive. I sat, adjusted the bench, and placed my hands on the keys, and froze. My mind went blank. The notes I'd practiced thousands of times vanished. My hands trembled so badly, I couldn't hold them steady over the keys. Sweat beaded on my forehead as seconds stretched into an excruciating minute of silence. From the audience, I heard my mother's harsh whisper, "Play Rosa." I managed to start, but the music that came out was a shadow of what I was capable of. Hesitant, error-filled, lacking all emotion. Halfway through, my hands simply stopped. I couldn't continue. I looked up to see the pitying faces of the judges and the mortified expression of my mother. I walked off stage to scattered, uncomfortable applause. In the car ride home, my mother didn't speak until we pulled into our driveway. "You embarrassed yourself today. More importantly, you embarrassed me." "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Sorry doesn't fix what happened. I've invested everything in your talent, Rosa. Years of lessons, competitions, opportunities most kids would kill for. And you threw it all away because you couldn't control yourself." That night I made a decision. I would finish high school, continue my lessons to appease my mother, but I would never perform publicly again. Music would be private just for me. My mother raged, cajoled, even tried therapy not to address my anxiety but to fix my self-sabotage. Nothing changed my mind. The thought of performing again brought panic attacks so severe I couldn't breathe. After high school, I attended a state college instead of the conservatory my mother had planned for majoring in music education. I would teach others to love music without the crushing pressure I'd experienced. It was in my mother's eyes settling for mediocrity. Amanda, meanwhile, continued to flourish. Homecoming queen, college at Northwestern, a job at a prestigious marketing firm, now an engagement to Jake Prescott from a family nearly as wealthy and status-conscious as my parents. I built a quiet life teaching piano to children, finding fulfillment in their progress and joy. I had a small circle of close friends, a modest apartment, and enough students to pay my bills. My relationship with my mother cooled to obligatory holiday visits and occasional tense phone calls, while Amanda remained the family success story. A month before Amanda's wedding, while searching for a particular music book for a student, I discovered a box in my closet I hadn't opened since moving to my apartment. Inside were mementos from my musical past competition programs, sheet music with my notations, and surprisingly a flash drive I didn't recognize. Curious, I plugged it into my laptop. It contained audio files labeled with dates spanning my childhood from ages 6 to 15. I clicked on one from when I was 10. The sound of a piano filled my apartment, my playing from a recital I vaguely remembered. But what shocked me wasn't the technical proficiency unusual for a child. It was the emotion. Even at 10, I played with a depth of feeling that caught at my throat. File after file revealed the same thing, not just skill, but heart. Music that spoke. There was a text document on the drive as well. Opening it, I found a note from Mrs. Harmon, my first teacher. "Dear Rosa, I've recorded your playing over the years because someday I hope you'll hear what I hear. A rare and special voice. You don't just play notes, you speak through them. Whatever path you choose in music, never lose sight of this gift. It isn't about technical perfection, it's about truth." I sat in stunned silence as tears rolled down my cheeks. This was what my mother had never understood, what her pressure had nearly destroyed. My music had been special not because it was flawless, but because it was honest. That night, listening to my younger self play with a freedom I'd lost, I realized something important before my mother's ambition crushed my confidence. I had played from the heart. And perhaps somehow I could find my way back to that place. With 3 weeks until the wedding, I created a practice schedule that bordered on obsessive. Each morning before my students arrived, I worked through the classical pieces my mother had selected, Bach, Mozart, Debussy. Technically challenging, but pieces I'd known well in my performance days. The anxiety remained, creeping up my neck and tightening my chest whenever I imagined playing at the ceremony. But I was determined not to fail, not to give my mother the satisfaction of being right about me. In the evenings after my last student left, I found myself drawn to my own composition, something I dabbled in privately over the years but never shared. Inspired by the recordings of my younger self, I began working on a piece that expressed my journey, the love of music, the pressure, the failure, and the slow return to joy. It was personal, raw, and entirely unsuitable for a wedding ceremony, but working on it became my refuge from the stress of wedding preparations. 1 week before the wedding, Amanda visited my apartment. It was the first time she'd been there in over a year, and she looked out of place in her designer clothes amid my mismatched furniture and walls covered in student artwork. "The place looks nice," she said, though her expression suggested otherwise. "Thanks. Can I get you something to drink, water, coffee?" "Just water is fine." As I filled a glass in the kitchen, Amanda wandered to my piano where the wedding music lay open. "How's the practicing going?" I handed her the water. "Fine. I'll be ready." She nodded, seeming genuinely relieved. "I appreciate you doing this, Rosa. I know it's not easy for you. Mom said you specifically asked for me to play," I said carefully, watching her reaction. Amanda's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, well, I thought it would be nice to have you involved." She was lying. I could tell by the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. My mother had manipulated us both. "It's okay," I said. "I'm happy to do it for your big day." Amanda smiled, seemingly eager to move past the moment of awkwardness. "I'm excited for you to meet Jake properly. He's been wanting to get to know my family better before the wedding." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Amanda jumped up to answer it, returning with a tall, broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Rosa, this is Jake. Jake, my sister Rosa." Jake extended his hand with a genuine smile. "I've heard so much about you. Amanda says you're the musical genius of the family." I blinked in surprise, shaking his hand. "I don't know about genius, but I do teach piano." "Don't be modest," Jake said. "Amanda's shown me videos of you playing from when you were younger. It was incredible." I glanced at my sister, who looked slightly embarrassed. "You kept those?" She shrugged. "Of course I did. You were amazing." This unexpected support left me momentarily speechless. For years, I'd assumed Amanda saw me through our mother's critical eyes. Perhaps there was more to my sister than I'd allowed myself to see. The moment was broken by my phone ringing. Catherine Miller, right on schedule. "Hi, Mom," I answered, mouthing an apology to Amanda and Jake. "Rosa, we need to change the processional piece. The one we selected doesn't fit with the pace Amanda wants to walk. I'm emailing you the new music now. I need you to have it perfect by Thursday's rehearsal." "Mom, that's 2 days away. And I've been practicing the other piece for weeks. You're supposedly a professional pianist, Rosa. This shouldn't be a problem unless you're admitting you're not up to the task." The familiar trap. If I pushed back, I was confirming her low opinion of me. "I'll handle it," I said tightly. "Good. And remember, this is your sister's day. No one is coming to hear you play." The call ended, and I turned to find Amanda and Jake watching me, having clearly heard my side of the conversation. "Mom's changing the music again," I explained, forcing a smile. Jake frowned. "That seems like a lot to ask at the last minute." "It's fine," I said automatically. "Part of the job." "It's not fine," Amanda said, surprising me. "I'll talk to her." "Don't," I said quickly. "It'll just make things worse. I can handle it." Amanda looked like she wanted to argue, but instead just squeezed my hand. "I really do appreciate what you're doing, Rosa." After they left, I checked my email to find not just one new piece, but 3, all technically more demanding than the original selections. My mother was raising the bar, perhaps hoping I'd fail to clear it. The week continued in this vein. My mother called daily with changes, criticisms, and thinly veiled reminders of my past failures. When I arrived at my parents' house for a family dinner, before the rehearsal, I discovered I'd been excluded from the pre-wedding photo shoot scheduled for the next morning. "It's just for immediate family and the wedding party," my mother explained dismissively when I asked. "I am immediate family," I pointed out. "You know what I mean, Rosa. You'll be busy practicing anyway." My father, Thomas, a successful surgeon who had always been emotionally absent, buried himself in his phone during these exchanges. He'd never been an ally, preferring to maintain peace by avoiding conflict entirely. The night before the rehearsal, I practiced, until my fingers ached, pushing through piece after piece until they were flawless. Still, the familiar dread built in my chest, the tightness that had once rendered me immobile on stage. I tried the breathing techniques my therapist had taught me years ago, but the anxiety persisted, a physical presence sitting on my chest. At the rehearsal the next day, I arrived at the grand church early to familiarize myself with the piano, a magnificent Steinway that deserved better than the mundane pieces my mother had selected. As I played through the processional, I heard footsteps behind me. "You sound wonderful, dear." I turned to see an older woman I didn't recognize, arranging sheet music on a stand near the piano. "Thank you. Are you with the church?" She smiled kindly. "No, I'm Elaine Winters, the backup pianist." My hands froze over the keys. Backup pianist. Yes, Catherine hired me just in case. Well, in case there were any issues with the primary musician. "That's you, I presume." The realization hit me like a physical blow. My mother hadn't just set me up to fail, she'd arranged for a public replacement when I did. The humiliation would be complete. Rosa Miller so incompetent she had to be replaced mid-wedding. "That's me," I confirmed, forcing a smile. "Just working out a few final details." Elaine patted my shoulder sympathetically. "Performance anxiety is nothing to be ashamed of, dear. If it becomes too much, I'll step in seamlessly. No one will even notice the transition. No one will notice. Just like my mother said. Background music." I thanked her and continued practicing a new emotion, cutting through the anxiety, anger. Pure, clarifying anger at years of manipulation and belittlement. That night, I received a call from my best friend Megan, checking in before the big day. "How are you holding up?" she asked. I told her everything, the last-minute changes, the backup pianist, my mother's transparent attempt to orchestrate my public failure. "What a nightmare," Megan said. "Can you back out?" And prove her right, no way. "Then maybe it's time to change the game," Megan suggested. "Your mother's expecting you to either fail playing her chosen pieces or back out entirely. What if you did neither?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if you played something else? Something that shows who you really are as a musician. Take control of the narrative." As soon as she said it, I knew what I had to do. My composition, the one I'd been working on in private, was nearly complete. It told my story in a way words never could. Playing it would be the ultimate act of defiance and truth-telling. "That would certainly surprise everyone," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "Especially your mother," Megan said. "Just make sure whatever you play is so damn beautiful no one can possibly interrupt it." After we hung up, I sat at my piano and played through my composition from beginning to end for the first time. It wasn't technically flawless, but it was honest, painfully, beautifully honest. I went to bed that night with my decision made. Tomorrow, I would either find my voice or lose it forever. The rehearsal dinner was held at an upscale restaurant with views of the city skyline. Crystal glasses caught the light from elegant chandeliers, and arrangements of white roses and lilies adorned every table. I arrived 15 minutes early, hoping to speak with Amanda before everything began, but was immediately intercepted by my mother. "Rosa, you're at table 5, she said, gesturing to the far corner of the room, with some of Jake's distant relatives. I glanced toward the family table, where my parents, Amanda, Jake, and his parents would be seated. "I'm not sitting with the family." My mother adjusted her pearl necklace, a nervous habit, when she was being deliberately cruel. The seating was quite difficult to arrange. "I'm sure you understand." I understood perfectly. I was the help, not family. "Of course," I said, swallowing the hurt. "Where should I put Amanda's gift?" "On the gift table with the others. Though I'm sure whatever you could afford will be overshadowed." She glanced meaningfully at a large, elaborately wrapped package I recognized as being from my parents. Throughout the dinner, I watched from a distance as my family laughed and celebrated. My tablemates were pleasant enough, though clearly confused about my relationship to the wedding party. "So you're a friend of Amanda's?" an elderly woman asked. "I'm her sister, actually." "Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I just assumed, since you're not sitting with the family." During the toasts, my mother rose gracefully, champagne flute in hand. "As we celebrate Amanda and Jake's union tomorrow, I'm filled with pride at the accomplished, beautiful woman my daughter has become. She has exceeded every expectation and represents the very best of our family." She continued, praising Amanda's achievements, her perfect match in Jake, their bright future together. We've arranged every detail of tomorrow's celebration to reflect the standard of excellence that defines our family, she said, her gaze briefly flicking to where I, Saturday. Amanda's sister, Rosa, will provide some background music during the ceremony and cocktail hour. A small contribution to what will surely be the social event of the season. Background music. A small contribution. The dismissal was so blatant that even Jake's relatives at my table shifted uncomfortably. I looked to Amanda, waiting for some sign of objection, but she was beaming at our mother's praise, perhaps not even registering the slight. My father sat stoically, his expression unchanged, raising his glass on cue. After the dinner, as guests mingled, I found myself alone near the bar when Jake approached. "That was some speech your mother gave," he said, ordering a scotch. "Very on brand, for Catherine Miller." He studied me thoughtfully. "Amanda talks about you a lot, you know, not just your music. She admires you." I couldn't hide my surprise. She has a funny way of showing it. "She's caught in the middle. Doesn't want to upset your mother." He paused. "For what it's worth, I think what you're doing tomorrow takes more courage than anything I've seen from the rest of your family." His kindness was unexpected and nearly broke through the emotional wall I'd built for the evening. "Thank you," I managed. "That means a lot." As the evening wound down, I overheard snippets of conversation near the coat check that made my blood run cold. Catherine mentioned her other daughter has some emotional problems, a woman was saying in a hushed tone. Yes. Apparently there was some sort of breakdown during a performance years ago. Catherine's worried about history repeating itself at the wedding, but what could she do? Amanda insisted on including her sister somehow. So brave of Catherine to handle a difficult child like that. Thank goodness Amanda turned out normal. I stood frozen, the pieces clicking into place. My mother hadn't just arranged for my failure. She'd been actively setting the stage for it, preparing guests for the spectacle of my humiliation by spreading rumors about my instability. I left without saying goodbye to anyone driving home in a state of numb clarity. This went beyond typical maternal criticism into something deliberately cruel. My mother wanted me to fail publicly to reinforce the narrative she'd carefully constructed about me over the years. Back in my apartment, I sat at my piano in the dark, my fingers moving silently over the keys of my composition. The music in my head had changed, taken on a sharper edge of determination. My phone lit up with a text from Amanda. "You left early. Everything okay for tomorrow?" I considered confronting her about our mother's machinations, but decided against it. Tomorrow wasn't about Amanda, or even about my mother. It was about me finally finding my voice. "Everything's fine," I texted back. "See you tomorrow." I stayed up late into the night finalizing my composition, making small adjustments to tell my story with absolute clarity. This piece wasn't just music. It was truth. My truth. As dawn broke on Amanda's wedding day, I made a promise to myself. I would no longer be background music in my own life. The day of Amanda's wedding dawned, clear and bright sunlight streaming through my bedroom window as if mocking my dark mood. I dressed carefully in the pale blue dress my mother had deemed appropriate for my role. Not quite a bridesmaid, but not quite a regular guest either. My hands trembled slightly as I applied minimal makeup and pulled my hair into a simple updo. On my bedside table, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Final change to the recessional piece. Sending now. Be at the church by 10 for sound check. Another last-minute change. Another hurdle to throw in my path. I didn't even look at the new music. It no longer mattered. I arrived at the church precisely at 10, carrying my well-worn leather portfolio containing sheet music I wouldn't be using. The ceremony space was a flurry of activity. Florists arranging elaborate displays of white roses and lilies. Photographers testing, lighting, wedding planners, barking orders into headsets. The Steinway grand piano sat to the right of the altar, gleaming black and imposing. I approached it slowly, running my fingers lightly over the fall board before sitting on the bench. A quick scale confirmed what I already knew: the instrument was perfectly tuned, responsive, magnificent. There you are. My mother appeared beside me, resplendent in a designer suit, the color of champagne, her hair and makeup already perfect 5 hours before the ceremony. "The sound engineer needs to test your microphone levels," she said, not bothering with a greeting. "The piano doesn't need amplification in this space," I replied, the acoustics of the church being naturally excellent. "Don't be difficult, Rosa. Everything needs to be perfect for Amanda's day." "And did you review the new music I sent?" "Yes," I lead smoothly. She narrowed her eyes, suspicious of my easy acquiescence, after weeks of pushing back against her changes. "Well, let's hear it then." My heart rate spiked. I wasn't prepared to show my hand yet. "I'd prefer to save it for the ceremony," I said. "My hands are a bit stiff this morning." Her expression hardened. "If you're not up to this—" "I am," I interrupted firmly. "I'll be ready when it matters." She studied me for a moment, then shrugged. "Elaine will be here by 11, just in case." Of course she would. The hours before the ceremony passed in a blur of microphone checks, last-minute adjustments to the floral arrangements, and my mother's increasingly thinly veiled reminders of the stakes. "Remember, if you start to feel overwhelmed, just signal to me, and we'll handle it discreetly." 800 guests are coming, Rosa. Some very important people. This isn't one of your little student recitals. The processional needs to be exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Not faster, not slower. Can you manage that? Each comment was designed to increase my anxiety, to push me toward the failure she anticipated. But instead of the familiar panic, I felt an eerie calm settling over me. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. An hour before guests were to arrive, I found a quiet corner in the church basement to center myself. I closed my eyes mentally, playing through my composition, my fingers moving in the air. The piece told the whole story: my love of music, the pressure, the failure, the years of diminishment, and finally, the reclaiming of my voice. "Rosa." I opened my eyes to find Amanda standing before me in a robe, her hair already styled but her makeup only half complete. "Hey," I said, surprised to see her. "Shouldn't you be getting ready? I wanted to check on you." She sat beside me, careful not to wrinkle her robe. "Mom's been pretty intense about the music." I laughed hollowly. "That's one way to put it." Amanda fidgeted with the belt of her robe. "I know she can be difficult, especially with you." "Difficult, Amanda. She's been deliberately setting me up to fail today. She hired a backup pianist and has been telling everyone I'm emotionally unstable." Amanda's eyes widened. "What? No, she wouldn't." "She would, and she has." I overheard her myself, and then confirmed it from multiple guests at the rehearsal dinner. Amanda looked stricken. I had no idea, I swear. Part of me wanted to believe her, but years of her silent complicity made it hard. "It doesn't matter," I said finally. "I'm going to play today, but not the way she expects." "What does that mean?" I considered telling her about my plan, but decided against it. Amanda had never stood up to our mother. I couldn't risk her warning Catherine. "It means I'm done being background music," I said instead. Amanda studied me, concern evident in her expression. "Rosa, please don't do anything to disrupt the wedding. Whatever issues you have with Mom, this isn't about Mom I cut in, or you. It's about me finally telling the truth." A makeup artist appeared at the door. "Amanda, we need to finish your makeup now if we're going to stay on schedule." Amanda rose reluctantly. "I should go." She paused, then surprised me by leaning down to hug me. "Whatever happens with Mom, know that I love you. Okay? I always have, even when I was too much of a coward to show it." The unexpected gesture nearly broke my composure. "I love you too. Now go be a bride." As the ceremony time approached, guests began filing into the church. I took my place at the piano, acutely aware of my mother watching from the side aisle, Elaine, the backup pianist, hovering nearby. My father approached briefly, looking uncomfortable in his formal attire. "All set?" he asked, his standard non-committal inquiry. "Yes," I replied, waiting for something more. Some acknowledgement of the pressure I was under, some word of encouragement. But as always, he retreated to safer ground. Good," he said, patting my shoulder awkwardly before walking away to take his position for the processional. The wedding planner gave me the signal to begin the prelude music as the final guests were seated. This was the moment my mother had been anticipating for weeks, the moment she expected me to crumble under the pressure. I placed my hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. Not Bach, not Mozart, not any of the classical pieces my mother had selected and reselected. Instead, my fingers found the opening notes of my own composition, a melody that began softly, hesitantly, like a child discovering music for the first time. The notes were simple, pure, filled with wonder and joy. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother's head snap up, her expression changing from satisfied anticipation to confusion, then alarm. She took a step toward the piano, but something in the music stopped her. The melody was evolving, growing more complex, intertwining, with a second theme that represented the pressure and expectations, the harmony, creating a tension that was both beautiful and uncomfortable. The guests who had been chatting quietly gradually fell, silent attention drawn to the unexpected music. I lost myself in the playing, no longer aware of the audience, the wedding, even my mother. There was only the truth flowing from my fingers, the story I'd kept inside for so long, finally finding expression. The wedding planner appeared beside my mother, gesturing frantically at her watch. The processional should have started by now. The bride was waiting. But the music held everyone in its spell, and I wasn't finished telling my story. As the piece built toward its first climax, the moment representing my public failure years ago, I finally looked up to see my mother's face. Her expression was a complex mix of fury, embarrassment, and something else, fear. Not fear of scandal or social embarrassment, but fear of the truth I was revealing through my music. I met her gaze directly as I played the most painful part of the composition, the notes discordant yet achingly beautiful, the sound of a spirit being crushed. And in that moment I knew with absolute certainty that I would finish this piece regardless of the consequences. The wedding was about to be derailed, but for once in my life I wasn't background music anymore. The church had fallen completely silent, 800 guests, transfixed by music they hadn't expected to hear. My composition moved into its next movement, the years after my failure, the quiet rebuilding of my relationship with music, notes that spoke of resilience in the face of continual dismissal. I was vaguely aware of movement at the back of the church. The wedding party was supposed to be processing now, but the music had disrupted the carefully orchestrated schedule. Through the peripheral blur, I saw the wedding planner gesticulating wildly. My mother engaged in heated whispers with her, both of them darting furious glances toward me. None of it mattered. I had found that rare and elusive state that musicians chase their entire lives, the perfect union of player and instrument, where the boundary between person and piano dissolves. Each note flowed from some deep, honest place within me, telling the story I'd never been able to put into words. The melody shifted again, growing in complexity and emotion. This section represented my awakening, the moment I rediscovered my authentic voice through the recordings of my younger self. The notes climbed higher, building towards something hopeful, only to be met with a counter-melody of doubt and fear. A figure appeared in my line of vision, my mother moving toward the piano with clear intent to stop me. But before she could reach me, someone intercepted her. Jake, Amanda's fiancé, smoothly stepping into her path, saying something I couldn't hear, but that caused my mother to step back, her face flushed with anger. I allowed myself the briefest smile and continued playing. The piece was approaching its emotional core, the section representing this very moment, the reclaiming of my voice, the refusal to remain in the background any longer. The music swelled, filling every corner of the church, with sound that was by turns defiant, joyful, and achingly vulnerable. Tears blurred my vision, but my fingers knew where to go, each note falling exactly where it should. I was dimly aware of people in the audience, wiping their eyes of an energy in the room that felt almost tangible. Connection, recognition, something deeply human being exchanged between performer and listeners. My father sat in the front row, his usual impassive expression replaced by something I'd never seen before, a mixture of regret and revelation, as if he was truly seeing me for the first time. Beside him, My mother had given up her attempts to interrupt and sat rigidly, her face a mask of controlled fury. The music built toward its climax, all the themes coming together in a complex interplay of pain and redemption. This wasn't just about my relationship with my mother anymore. It was about every person who had ever been silenced, diminished, pushed to the background of their own life. As the final movement began, I noticed movement at the back of the church again. This time it was Amanda, in her full wedding gown, moving slowly down the aisle. Not in the carefully practiced procession we had rehearsed, but alone, her expression solemn as she listened to my music. The wedding planner tried to stop her, but Amanda brushed past, continuing toward the front of the church. Everyone turned to watch the bride's unexpected entrance, but instead of proceeding to the altar where Jake waited, Amanda walked directly to the piano. Our eyes met as I played a wordless exchange passing between us. For the first time in our adult lives, I felt truly seen by my sister. Without speaking, she moved to stand beside the piano, a silent declaration of solidarity that spoke volumes. My mother half rose from her seat, her expression incredulous. But my father placed a restraining hand on her arm. Another surprise, my father finally taking action. After years of passive observation, the music was approaching its finale now, the resolution of all the conflict and pain, transforming into something new and unexpectedly beautiful. My fingers danced across the keys, the tempo increasing as the melody soared toward its conclusion. As I played the final notes, clear, resonant, filled with quiet triumph, the church remained in perfect silence. Then from the back row, someone began to applaud. The sound was joined by another person, then another, until the entire church was filled with applause, some guests rising to their feet. Amanda squeezed my shoulder, tears in her eyes. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you." I stood shakily facing the audience that had come for a wedding, and received something entirely different. Jake had moved to stand beside Amanda, his arm around her waist, looking at me with undisguised admiration. I believe he said loudly enough for the front rows to hear, "We've just witnessed something extraordinary." My mother pushed past my father and approached the piano, her face tight with controlled rage. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "You've completely derailed Amanda's wedding." But before I could respond, Amanda stepped between us. "No, Mom. Rosa hasn't derailed anything. She's made this day more meaningful than any perfect procession could have." "Don't be ridiculous," my mother snapped. "She's made a spectacle of herself and ruined your wedding timeline because of her selfish need for attention." "The only spectacle here," Amanda said, her voice steady, "is how you've treated Rosa all these years. I've watched it happen and said nothing because I was too afraid to stand up to you. Not anymore." My mother's face paled. "Amanda, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Amanda interrupted. "And so does everyone else who heard Rosa's music today. That wasn't just a performance. It was the truth." A murmur of agreement rippled through the guests nearest to us. My father had approached as well, his expression uncharacteristically resolute. "Catherine," he said quietly, "that's enough." My mother turned to him, clearly expecting his support. "Thomas, surely you see." "What I see," he said, "is that I've failed Rosa by staying silent all these years. I won't make that mistake again today." The wedding planner hovered anxiously at the edge of our family confrontation. "Should we proceed with the ceremony?" she asked hesitantly. Amanda looked at Jake, a silent question passing between them. He nodded and turned to the guests. "Friends and family," he announced, "we apologize for the unconventional start to our celebration. What you've just witnessed was an incredible gift from the bride's sister. A piece of music composed specifically for today that has reminded us all what really matters." He smiled at me. "We'd like to proceed with our vows now, with Rosa's blessing." I nodded, overwhelmed by this unexpected turn of events. And Amanda added, taking my hand, "I'd like to ask my sister to stand with me during the ceremony. Not as background music, but as my honored attendant." A ripple of approving murmurs and applause spread through the church as Amanda led me to stand beside her at the altar. My mother remained frozen near the piano, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling around her. As the ceremony began beautifully, joyfully, though not at all according to Catherine Miller's meticulously planned script. I caught the eye of a woman in the third row who had been watching the family drama with particular interest. She smiled and handed me a business card as I passed Sophia Reynolds' Harmonia Records. We should talk after the ceremony. That composition deserves to be heard by a wider audience. I slipped the card into my pocket, a smile spreading across my face. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to playing for an audience again, not as background music, but as the voice I was always meant to be. The wedding reception was not what my mother had planned. The perfectly orchestrated sequence of events she had mapped out gave way to something more organic and genuine. After my unplanned performance, and the emotional ceremony that followed, the atmosphere had transformed from formal sophistication to authentic celebration. I sat at a table near the dance floor, watching Amanda and Jake's first dance, when my father approached 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "May I join you?" he asked, offering me one of the glasses. I nodded, surprised by the gesture. Thomas Miller had always been a peripheral figure in my emotional life, physically present but emotionally distant, delegating all parenting decisions to my mother. He sat heavily, looking older than his 62 years. "I owe you an apology, Rosa." Many apologies, actually. I waited, not making it easier for him. He had earned this discomfort. "I knew what your mother was doing to you all these years," he continued, his voice low. "The pressure, the criticism, the comparisons. I told myself I was staying neutral, not taking sides. But there's no such thing as neutrality in a situation like that. My silence was a choice, the wrong choice. Why, I asked simply. It was the question I'd wanted to ask him for years." He sighed, swirling the champagne in his glass. "Fear mostly. Your mother is formidable." Somewhere along the way, it became easier to retreat into my work than to engage in battles I didn't think I could win. He met my eyes directly. "That's not an excuse, just the pathetic truth. And today," I prompted, "what changed?" "Your music," he said softly. "When you played, I heard everything you've never said. Everything I refused to hear. It was like being shown a mirror that reflected all my failures as a father." His voice broke slightly. "I can't undo the past, Rosa, but I can promise to do better from now on if you'll let me." The sincerity in his eyes was something I'd rarely seen. "I'd like that," I said finally. Across the room, my mother sat at the family table, uncharacteristically subdued. The events at the church had upended her carefully maintained control, and she seemed unsure how to proceed in this new reality where her narrative no longer dominated. Amanda appeared beside our table, radiant in her wedding gown. "Mind if I steal my sister for a minute, Dad?" My father nodded, squeezing my hand before walking away. Amanda took his vacated seat. "Quite a wedding day," she said with a small smile. "I'm sorry if I hijacked your ceremony." I replied, still uncertain how she truly felt about the dramatic deviation from the planned proceedings. "Are you kidding? Everyone is calling it the most memorable wedding they've ever attended." She reached for my hand, but more importantly, it forced some truths into the open that have been buried too long. Like Mom's systematic campaign to undermine me, Amanda winced. "I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize how deliberate it was until today. I've been a terrible sister, Rosa." "You were a child when it started," I said, "and by the time you were old enough to recognize what was happening, the pattern was established. That doesn't excuse my silence as an adult." She squeezed my hand. "When I heard your music today, really heard it, I finally understood what you've been through, how alone you must have felt." We both glanced toward our mother, who was now engaged in conversation with one of Jake's relatives, her social mask firmly back in place. "She hasn't spoken to me since the ceremony," Amanda said. "I think she's in shock that her perfect plan fell apart so spectacularly." "She'll regroup," I said. "Catherine Miller always does." "Maybe. But things won't go back to the way they were. I won't let them." The conviction in Amanda's voice was new, a strength I hadn't seen in her before. Jake joined us, loosening his tie and kissing Amanda's cheek before turning to me. "Your performance was the highlight of our wedding, Rosa. Everyone's talking about it." "Everyone except my mother," I noted wryly. "She'll come around," Jake said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. or she won't. But either way, you've changed the dynamic for good. As the evening progressed, various guests approached to compliment my playing, many expressing surprise that I wasn't performing professionally. Sophia Reynolds, the record company executive, cornered me near the dessert table. That composition wasn't just good, it was revelatory, she said, without preamble. The technical skill was impressive, but it was the emotional truth that made it extraordinary. I'd like to discuss recording possibilities when you're ready. I took her card, promising to call the following week, a flutter of excitement and fear mingling in my chest. The possibility of sharing my music more widely was both thrilling and terrifying. Near the end of the reception, as guests began to depart, my mother finally approached me. She'd been drinking more than usual, though she hid it well. Only the slight flush on her cheeks and the too careful precision of her movements gave her away. "Well, Rosa," she said, her voice brittle, "you certainly made quite an impression tonight." "That wasn't my intention," I replied truthfully. "I was just finally being honest." "Honest?" She laughed sharply. "You deliberately undermined months of planning to make yourself the center of attention at your sister's wedding. If that's your idea of honesty, I'd hate to see your definition of sabotage." Before I could respond, Amanda appeared at my side. "That's enough, Mom. Rosa didn't undermine anything. If anything, she made this day more meaningful than it would have been otherwise." My mother's eyes narrowed. "I see you've both decided to rewrite history. Fine. Enjoy your little rebellion." She turned to leave, but paused. "Just remember, Rosa, one emotional performance doesn't erase years of failure and disappointment." "You're right," I said quietly. "It doesn't erase the past, but it does change the future." She walked away without responding, her back rigid with anger, and perhaps the first inklings of understanding that she had lost her power over me. "I'm sorry," Amanda said after she'd gone. "That was classic Mom lashing out when she feels cornered." I shrugged, surprised to find that my mother's words no longer had the power to wound me as deeply as they once had. It's okay. For the first time, I see her criticism for what it is, her problem, not mine. The months following Amanda's wedding brought changes I could never have anticipated. Sophia Reynolds arranged for me to record my composition titled simply Truth, along with several new pieces I'd written. The recording received unexpected attention in classical music circles, praised for its emotional authenticity and innovative structure. I continued teaching my young students, finding even more joy in it now that I had reclaimed my own relationship with music. My father made halting but sincere efforts to rebuild our relationship sometimes, joining me for coffee or attending small performances I began giving at local venues. My mother remained distant, unable or unwilling to acknowledge her role in our fractured family dynamic, but her power over me had dissipated her criticism, no longer the devastating force it once was. 3 months after the wedding, Amanda invited me to dinner at her and Jake's new home. To my surprise, my father was also present, though my mother had declined the invitation. "I have news," Amanda announced, as we finished the main course. 2 pieces of news, actually. Jake reached for her hand, smiling encouragingly. "First," Amanda continued, "I've accepted a new job with a non-profit arts organization instead of returning to the marketing firm. It's a significant pay cut, but it feels right." She glanced at Jake. "We both agreed that pursuing work that matters is more important than maintaining the lifestyle Mom thinks we should have." "That's wonderful," I said, sincerely seeing a new lightness in my sister that had been absent before. "The second piece of news," she said, her voice softening, "is that I'm pregnant. You're going to be an aunt, Rosa." I hugged her tightly, genuinely thrilled for her and Jake. My father beamed, already embracing his future role as grandfather. "I want things to be different for my child," Amanda said as we settled back into our seats. "No comparisons, no impossible standards, no conditional love. I want them to be exactly who they are without feeling they need to perform to be valued." "They'll be lucky to have you as parents," I said, my throat tight with emotion. "And you as their Aunt," Jake added. "Someone who can teach them about music and authenticity and standing up for themselves, even when it's terrifying." 6 months after the wedding, I gave my first public recital in over a decade. The small community hall was filled to capacity, including many of my students and their parents. Amanda and Jake sat in the front row. Amanda now visibly pregnant. My father occupied the seat beside them, having driven 2 hours to attend. My mother's seat remained empty, though I'd sent the invitation more as a statement than with any real expectation she would come. As I approached the piano, the familiar anxiety fluttered in my chest, but it was different now. Not the paralyzing fear of failure that had once defined me, but the natural nervousness of sharing something deeply personal. I took a deep breath and began to play. The first piece was Truth, the composition that had changed everything at Amanda's wedding. As the final notes faded, I looked up to see my students watching in wide-eyed wonder, my sister wiping away tears, and my father sitting straighter than I'd ever seen him, pride evident in his expression. But it was the figure standing at the back of the hall that caught me by surprise. My mother, elegant as always, her expression unreadable. She didn't approach after the performance, didn't join the small reception that followed. But she had come, had listened. It was perhaps the beginning of her own reckoning with the truth. A year after Amanda's wedding, I found myself in a place I'd never expected to be, teaching advanced students at a prestigious music school while continuing to compose and perform my own work. My first album had been released to critical acclaim, and I was planning a small tour of intimate venues where the connection between performer and audience could be maintained. At a charity event for children with anxiety disorders, I shared my own story, before performing, speaking openly about the pressure, the panic attacks, the years of silence, and the eventual return to music on my own terms. The most important thing I've learned, I told the audience, is that true talent isn't about technical perfection or meeting someone else's expectations. It's about honesty. It's about finding your authentic voice and having the courage to let it be heard, especially when others try to silence you. As I played the final piece of the evening, a new composition about healing and forgiveness, I realized that the music flowing from my fingers was no longer defined by pain. There was something new there: hope, joy, possibility. The story wasn't finished, but it had taken a turn I never could have imagined on that day when I stood frozen at the piano during my sister's wedding. I wasn't background music anymore. I was exactly who I was, meant to be my voice, clear, strong, and finally, irrevocably my own. Have you ever been pushed to the background in your own life? How did you find your voice again? Or are you still searching for it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their own voice today. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it gives you courage for yours.